Yep, that's good. Now you should be able to hear me.
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, that's going to start booting this thing up. So even though I just ran it, it's been sitting for an hour. Boy, that wind is really blowing that around, isn't it? So the oil's probably cold. So it will probably have to choke. So the way you do that, oh, so I left that out. That comes all the way out, and this locks it.
Okay.
If you don't lock it, it'll just creep right back in. So we have to lock it out. To get the choke to work, this is a Rotax 912 if you ever hear of one of those. This has to be all the way out for the choke to work. And then it's left, out, right. And then it'll start now just like a car. It'll just start right up, but it's going to be a little rough until we take the choke off. So what we'll do is we'll start the engine. We'll wait until we see oil pressure, and then I'll kind of ease the throttle in a little bit and then turn off the choke.
Okay.
So to get it started, we have to turn on both of the ignitions. Oh, hold on a minute. I want to accept that.
So with the choke, it was left, out, right?
Yep, and then it'll be left back. It'll go in by itself.
Okay.
Okay, so turn on ignition A and B. And now just start it like you would a car. There it goes. Whoops, give it a little more. All right, stop. So it doesn't need the choke. Give it a little bit of gas, now do it. There we go. And there's oil pressure coming up. That's the first thing we look for. So until the oil warms up, it just gives you this tiny little green arc on the tach.
Yeah.
See that? So we want to stay inside of that. So it really isn't about the oil warming up. It's about the engine. It's a very modern engine, so it's done to really tight tolerances. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of dissimilar metals in there, so they're not going to expand at the same rate.
Okay.
So if you rev the engine up right now and things not all expanded out, it's bad for the engine. So they've determined, Rotax has determined at 120 degrees oil temperature, all of the metal is expanded out, and you can go ahead and run it on up. So basically, we're just going to watch for 120 before we do anything really serious with the throttle.
Okay.
We'll still be able to taxi like this. You just got to kind of maintain your momentum.
Mm-hmm.
It does not have a steerable nose wheel like a Cessna would have. You steer with the brakes. So the trick is kind of keeping the airplane moving while still using the brakes to get it to turn without coming to a stop and then trying to kind of get it to go again.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an acquired skill. This is purple. This airplane has an ADS-B unit. So that means we're going to get weather information.
Okay.
Is going to be pumped down. That's what it's doing right now. It says there's no signal. It may pick up once we're in the air. Once it has all the radar information, that purple goes away. That kind of a purple background is just telling you, hey, I don't have any radar information yet. We're not overly worried about it today. It's 20,000 and it's 20,000 overcast, but there's no real weather to worry about.
Yeah.
We'll pick up the winds and everything. So the tower's going to read it to us. It'll come up on here at some point and say the winds they're basically out of the south at 7 or 8 knots. As far as where we're going to go, we'll probably just go out to show you some of the airports you could be flying out of instead of going all the way to Bell Fountain.
Okay.
So we'll go out, we'll fly over Madison County, we'll fly up over Delaware. And then if we can get high enough, this is 4,800 feet above the Class C at Columbus. If we can get up to about 5,500, we'll come back down across the top of that and go past campus and all the scenic stuff.
That'll be
great.
Then
that'll bring us right back down into Bolton. It'll probably be a half hour, 45 minutes.
Sounds perfect.
So, we want to get Madison County in there in the GPS. This is the GPS also. Everything's built into that. Transponder's built in, everything's built in. Autopilot's all built into that. So, anything navigational is going to be, that's part of the map. So these buttons are context sensitive. They change as you use them. So if we go to map, we're going to do a direct to, and it's the D with the arrow is always direct to. And this is where we are. Now, I went out to Madison County this morning with Scott, or Austin. So this one moves across those tabs. So once to the left to go to recent, and there's Madison County is KUYF. So you would just go down, down.
Okay, down.
See how it's highlighted now?
Yeah.
So just hit the direct button. And there it is. That's all. And see, we have it on the HSI also. So that's done. I always like to go back up to the top menu. That way, when you go to do something, you're always starting from the same place. And I'm not 100% disciplined at it, but I try to be.
Yeah. And
that's just a personal practice. That way, I don't have to. I got to go up 2 levels to get to what I'm after. So actually, the oil's heating up very quickly.
You said 120.
Yeah. So it's heating up very quickly because it's already been flown. It has a preheater on it. The 912 is a dry sump engine, so instead of the oil being down underneath the sump of the engine, it's on a tank mounted to the firewall.
Okay.
And that's where the heating element is to preheat that oil. But that only heats the oil in the tank, not the stuff that's still left in the oil lines. But since I already flew it this morning, the stuff in the oil lines was probably still already warm. So this is going to heat up quickly. It's not going to be any problem at all. Everything else is looking good. We're draining on the battery, which is interesting. Let's run the... Yeah, there goes my ammeter. Okay, just making sure it's going to charge. When you see -1, that means it's running off of the battery instead of the generator.
Okay.
So I just wanted to rev it up a little bit. make sure that was going to come back up at least to 0, so it's not showing a drain. When we're flying along, it'll be up at +1 or 0.2, but it's nice to know now. You don't want to fly off if you're draining the battery. You come back, you got no radio and all that.
That'd be really
not necessarily a fun thing. Field elevation here is 905 at the runway. Up here it's 915 or 920. So the way we adjust that, here's your barometer setting. It's not the mechanical Colesman window, it's right there. And the knob for it is right here. So I'm just going to assume it's going to come in somewhere at like 30, 38. And the tower will tell us when we call him, but at least I have it in there and ready to go.
Yeah.
So we can go ahead and call him. It's just going to be, have you done a tower controlled airport?
I've never done.
Okay, so a control tower, or actually any air traffic control, it's who you think you're talking to. So we're going to say Bolton ground, and right away we'll find out if we're in the wrong spot. He'll say, well, this isn't Bolton ground, or he won't say anything. Who we are, this is an experimental airplane, so I'm required by law at initial contact to let them know it's an experimental airplane. So instead of saying Cessna 284 Delta Golf, I'll say experimental 284 Delta Golf. So it's who am I talking to, who I am, where I am, we're at the T-hangars, what we want, we're ready to taxi. And I go ahead and tell them, because they're so close to the Class C airspace, they'd like to know what direction you're going to see if you're going to be a factor to Columbus approach or not.
Okay.
So the full thing is going to be Bolton ground, experimental 284 Delta Golf at the T-hangars, ready to taxi, departing VFR westbound. And that lets him know he's not going to have to do anything with Columbus approach or departure. He can just let us go.
Okay.
He's going to clear us probably to runway 22, which is nice because that's the close one. If he tends it's a 4, it's about a mile away.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, what are you going to do? So we'll go ahead and get that. We might as well go. Bolton ground, experimental 284 Delta Golf at the T-hangars, ready to taxi, departing VFR westbound. Wake him up.
Experimental 284 Delta Golf, Bolton ground, runway 22, taxi via Bravo and Alpha. Wind is 180 at 10, altimeter is 3042.
And taxi Bravo to Alpha, runway 22, Delta Golf. So he called that altimeter, what did he call it? 22?
22.
That seems wrong too. I find that hard to believe. That can't be right. I gotta leave it where it is. And it'll show up in here eventually. There, it's starting to receive data. The antenna for that is down on the bottom of the airplane.
Okay.
I don't know where the transmitter is. Sometimes I get it really clearly sitting here. Sometimes it waits until I'm, down on the runway or in the air.
Yeah.
That's traffic. That's an airplane 3,600 feet above us and climbing. Probably came right out of Port Columbus, which is KCMH.
Yeah.
So I'm steering basically with just tapping the brake. See how it's in a turn by itself, but now I'm using the left brake to pull it back out of it.
Yeah.
But I'm being very gentle on it because I don't want to stop the plane. Although here we have plenty of throttle, so I could. I just, it works best if it's just light taps and you just kind of keep up with it. So see, it's starting to drift off to the right, so I just get that just a little bit to the left.
To the left, yeah.
And it takes a lot of that. It's always wanting to pull a little bit to the right until it wants to go left. Because it's just swiveling around up there. So there's a crown to this little drain, so you get on the left, it wants to keep going left. If a wind comes shooting through those hangars, it comes through like a wind tunnel, hits that tail, wants to push us to the right because it's pushing the tail to the left.
Yeah.
So basically you're just riding the brakes. So these things go through brake pads fairly quickly. They're not super expensive and I can change them myself. Actually you can do that even on a factory built plane. But I can do anything I want on this because it's experimental.
Yeah.
But they're not that hard to change and they're not that expensive. So it's just something, I think the designer made the decision between, well, you're probably going to go through a lot of brake pads, but the mechanical complexity of having these rudder pedals attached to a nose wheel is probably more than you want to deal with when you're building a whole airplane, and would cost more and way more and yada yada. And you get used to it pretty quickly. It's on takeoff, it's kind of weird because, you have a wind, typically you have a crosswind, wants to turn the airplane, and as you're just getting started, there's not enough air across the rudder for it to steer the airplane. So you're doing it with the brakes, which seems kind of counterintuitive when you're trying to get the thing off the ground to be dragging a brake. But with this airplane, the nose wheel is not the strongest part of the airplane. So I don't know if you ever got as far as like soft field takeoffs. The idea to get that nose wheel up out of all that grunge so the plane can accelerate. So in a plane like this, we do pretty much what's very, very similar to a soft field takeoff all the time.
Okay.
So what's going to happen at takeoff is I'm going to hold that stick back and I'm going to feed it in the throttle and the nose is going to start to come up. I'll ease the stick off just to hold the nose at a constant angle. Once I feel the back pressure on the stick, that tells me the nose is getting ready to come up. That means there's enough air across the rudder to start steering with the rudder. And I won't even think about this, it'll just happen. I'll stop using the brakes and I'll start steering with the rudder. and I just hold that nose up, and at around 50, 55 knots, it's just going to fly off all by itself.
Okay.
There'll be there's a crosswind, so you'll feel a little bump to the side. Once it comes off the ground, that rudder's going to get kicked over, and so there'll be a little push off to the side. It's all going to happen in about 5-6 seconds. This thing doesn't take long at all to get off the ground. So we'll do our run up here. I think everything's working just fine since we just got back an hour ago. So this one, the RPMs, I don't know what you're flying, but this is a geared engine. It's a tiny little engine that makes 100 horsepower, and it does that through making a whole lot of RPM. So 5,500 RPM, all of that, the RPM factors into your horsepower equation. The faster it's turning, the better.
Yeah.
The propeller can't survive 5,500 RPM. It would fly to pieces. So it's got a reduction gearbox in it. So they had a decision when they built this airplane. They could either give you the engine RPM or the propeller RPM. And people coming out of Cessnas and things like that, where like 2,500 RPM is full throttle, would probably be more used to that. But they went with engine RPM.
Okay.
So this engine redlines at 5,500, but your propeller RPM is about half that.
Okay.
But in any event, for the run-up, see, this would be almost full throttle on a Cessna. For run-up, we go up to 4,000. And then we'll do our mag checks. And basically, we're just turning off one set of spark plugs per cylinder to make sure that the other ignition system picks up the load. So what you'll do is you'll turn off ignition A,
okay,
and we'll look for about 100 RPM drop. That's about good. You don't want any more than about 150 to 200. I think they'll let you fly with 300, but I wouldn't do it. So turn that back on, and it should recover back up. Now do ignition B. So both ignition systems are working, everything is fine, so we'll turn that back on, and we're ready to go with the engine. And see, we're making amperage now, so everything's working fine. Everything's out of the yellow now. Once it warms up, all that yellow goes away. And we'll pull this back again. See how that picked up, because it's not turning as fast, it's not making as much electricity.
Yeah.
All right, so we want to do our before takeoff check. This is all important stuff. The most important thing is to make sure this canopy is latched. I just always double, triple check that, because it'll fly, if you take off with that unlatched, it'll fly up about this high. All that wind's going to come in, it's going to get really, really noisy, and people get all panicky and they crash your airplane.
Yeah.
So we just make sure that's latched so we never have to deal with that. We want the flaps to be up. So this is how you do your flaps. This is a release knob. That's one notch, that's full. So when we land, that's what we're going to do. We can take off with one notch. There's no point in it. It's 5,300 foot runway, and we need about 800 feet of it. So we take off the flaps up and latched. You want to make sure, whenever you move, you want to make sure it pops back in like that.
Locks in.
Yep. So we got the canopy latch, we got our flaps up. There's no mixture or anything to fiddle around with. It's all pretty straightforward. We want to set the trim to take off. Your trim indicator is those two white triangles in that green bar.
Yeah.
So if I give it trim up, see how the triangles move away from that?
Yeah.
You don't want to take off like that, fly up in the air, you won't be ready for it. So you want it to be right on that little green bar. This green light means that the spar pins are in. These wings are removable.
Okay.
So it's got these two big steel pins. They're right, one behind your seat, one behind mine. They have a little electric switch to tell whether they're in or not. So the green means they're in. We'd have found out by now if they weren't. Probably would have fallen off right on the taxiway. But that lets us know those are in there. So really, we're ready to go. Just kind of going left to right. We have both of them ignitions on. We have a course plot in. We know where we're going to go. We're going to follow that purple line. We got our trim set. Avionics and autopilot are on, which you can tell because there's no big red X's telling me that they're not. Fuses, if any of these fuses were blown, they would light up, which I think is a neat little feature. Never seen it happen, but that's what they're supposed to do. All the fuses are in. We can also tell that because everything is working. We want to go over to the tower frequency. The way we can verify that that's tower is it'll tell you KTZR, which is Bolton Field, tower, and there's your ground. So that's your active frequency, so we're all good there. We already did trim, chokes off, cabin heat's on, throttle's fine. So everything's pretty much ready to go. So I'm going to call him. I'm going to tell him we're at runway 22 at Alpha 1, ready for takeoff, departing VFR westbound. Even though it's the same guy, and he already knows that, you treat him as if they're separate people, because that's the way it would be at a bigger airport. And he will tell you, if you call him on the wrong frequency, he'll make you change. They have their policies and procedures to follow, just like we do. So we're going to tell him we're at ready for takeoff, runway 22 at Alpha 1, departing VFR westbound. He's going to clear us for takeoff and turn on course. And we'll go out onto the runway, and it'll be just like I told you before. That's a plane landing at Rickenbacker.
Okay.
So, Bolt Tower, experimental 284 Delta Golf, ready for takeoff, runway 22 at Alpha 1, departing VFR westbound.
Experimental 4 Delta Golf, Bolton Tower, runway 22, clear for takeoff. Proceed on course.
Clear for takeoff 22, proceed on course 4 Delta Golf. And we get on out there because it doesn't matter here but at most towered airports, if they're busy, when he clears you to go, you get going. I got crosswind from the left, so the airplane's going to want to even go harder left than it usually does just from the engine torque, so I'm going to have a lot of right brake and then a lot of right rudder. So I got to stick back. I'm just going to get that throttle all the way in. I'm steering with the brake still, but I'm starting to feel pressure on the back there. There's the nose up, so now the rudder should work. Get it on over there. There it goes. Holding a lot of rudder. There we go. It just flies off on its own. Now, it climbs like a bat out of hell. I mean, this is just amazing climb. This is 1,000 feet per minute at 73 knots. That's 1,100 feet per minute, 74 knots. I'd rather be able to see out the window, so I'm just gonna punch the trim down a little bit. There, so we can see a lot better now. Yep. We're not in any big hurry to climb. It's nice to get about 500 feet under you in case something happens with the engine. But I'd rather be able to see where we're going. There's so much runway and flat area around us anyway. I mean, if the engine quit at 200 feet, we'd still have a mile of runway in front of us.
Yeah.
So there's my neighborhood out there.
Okay.
So I usually get about across Johnson Road here before I turn. And we told them we were going to go out to the west, so we'll just go on out to the west. It's nice to live that close to the airport. It's no accident. It was very deliberate.
That's a long drive to work, though.
That's why I get up at 4:30 in the morning, because I can't stand the traffic.
That makes a lot more sense.
Okay, so take the stick in your left hand. You want the right hand for the throttle.
Okay.
And we're just going to basically follow that purple line. We got an airplane coming in 800 feet above us, headed right at us, so we're going to watch for him. And just climb us up to about 3,500.
Okay.
Your airplane. I'll watch for that guy. He's 8 miles out, so we won't see him yet. And he's probably going to be descending into Bolton while we're climbing out. So we'll watch his C's already. He'll probably end up underneath us.
Okay.
Should hear him calling the tower pretty soon.
Bolton Tower, flight design 225 Kilo Bravo is 7 miles to the west and down for full stop.
Design 5 Kilo Bravo, report midfield right downwind, runway 22. Wind is 180 at 10, altimeter is 3042.
Now to center this back up, I'm going to zoom you back out. Instead of flying all the way back to that course, we don't really care about our precise course, we're just homing on the airport. So to center that back up again, you go back to the map, you hit direct again, goes where we already were, so you just hit direct one more time, and that's reset it.
Reset it, okay.
So now, this is your track across the ground. This doesn't compensate for wind, but this will. So if you turn so this white line is right on top of that purple line, it'll take you right to it. And it'll correct for all the crosswinds and such. 3,500 is enough. We don't have to go any higher than this. There you go. So now you can trim out. What is it doing? It's wanting to climb. So this is your trim down, and it's going to move fast. So just a couple notches on that. You'll start to feel that climbing pressure come off.
Yeah.
And we'll let it drift back down to about 3,500. So this is your vertical speed. You want it to be below that line. Right now you're at 300 feet plus. You want that to be negative. So just give her another bump or two on there, and you can pull back the throttle. If we start going too fast, you just pull back the throttle. And you just have to loosen that outer, you loosen that with one part of your hand and then pull. Feel it?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that. Perfect. There you go. I feel it's coming down now. How many lessons did you have?
I had 2.
2?
And then I had 2 discovery flights.
Okay. So you haven't done much real training then?
Not loads, no.
Okay. So fundamental stuff is, straight and level is what they start you out with.
Yeah. Which
you're doing okay at. About the second or third lesson, we'd start marking at you about the altitude. Hey, try to keep that around 3,500. I've flown with people that their first time, they're so overwhelmed that they simply, my standards were keep us in North America, but not on it. Let's stay above it. And then I've had people just, it's like they've been doing it their entire lives.
5 Kilo Bravo, continue straight ahead, Alpha 3 depart.
Alpha 3 to the ramp, 5 Kilo Bravo.
There you go. Couple hundred more feet and you'll be there. plane coming off of Madison County, runway 9.
I like how you know exactly which runway it is.
Oh, it's painted right on there.
Oh, is it? I
Well,
can't really see from here.
Yeah. Oh, this is my backyard too.
Yeah.
I can definitely tell you the runway on Madison County. Now Delaware, I think they're east-west also. They might be 26 or 27, I can't remember, but I think that's also east-west. But you go down to Circleville, it's north-south. It's 01 and 19er.
Okay.
Now we'll find out about that runway at Delaware. I'll talk you through that once we get on course. And what we'll do is we'll turn on the autopilot for a minute.
Okay.
So you don't have to pay so much attention. Now we'll do it the easy way. The level button's just going to hold whatever heading or whatever altitude you're at.
Okay.
It's very easy to do.
So let's get up.
Yeah,
to
so just get us in a general, just generally pointed at it. We'll adjust as we get closer.
Okay.
All right, so roll it out. And now we'll just push the level button.
Or ground, how can I help you?
And you should be able to just let go. And what are we at? Let's get a little more. There we go. That's good power. All right, so we want to find the airport runway in Delaware. So that's going to be on the map. So that's your map button. It's informational, so that's going to be info. And it's going to be under RWY. Now, also need to know is pattern altitude. It was 2,000 feet. We'll come back. Oops, wait a minute. Yeah, get back to, should be able to just go back to recent. Push up, there you go. And I'll have
That was the problem.
down one, and then start going to the right. Nope, to the right. There you go.
Okay.
One more.
WX.
There we go, one more.
And run.
There we go. So the runway there is 10 and 2/8, so it is east-west.
Okay.
So when being out of the south, it would be our choice which way we go on that. Since we're coming at it from the south and it's east-west, we would probably just do a direct 45 into a left downwind for 2/8. So that's interesting to know. Weather, the altimeter is on here somewhere, 3039, so 3022. He must have said 32, that's ridiculous. So 39, there it is right there. So that's nice to know. Temperature, well, here's your winds out of the south at 9, so we already talked about that. It'd be our choice on the runway. So we're done with that. We probably want to know the Unicom frequency. Well, actually, their AWAS is being interesting. Let's dial up their AWAS first. So you push tune, and that AWAS frequency is going to come over here to standby.
Okay.
So we'll make it active, and then we'll put Unicom in standby. So we're done with that. So we can get out of that. And traffic pattern altitude is something we want to know. So to remember that, by the time we get there, I'll forget. So we're going to put 2,000 in right there. This is our altimeter setting for the autopilot.
Yeah.
We're just going to use it to remind us 2,000 feet is our pattern altitude.
Okay.
So now we can go back, and we're just going to fly along. Now what we can do, I can tell the autopilot that I want to go by track. First, let's line it up. I'll hold this down, and that'll line it up with the airplane. See that little line? I'm going to tell the autopilot I want to go track, and it's going to follow that, and I'll use it to track us back to that course.
Delaware Municipal Airport. Automated weather observation. 1735 Zulu weather. Wind 18.
And this we already know because we already read it.
Yeah.
So we can just start listening to see who's flying around up there. Not that we care, but if we were actually going to land, we would. Now we're 10 miles out of Delaware. If we were going to land, this is when I'd be really listening to see what's going on, before I come into the pattern. The zoo is over there.
Okay.
There, you can see all three of the reservoirs, basically.
Yeah. So what made you choose flying?
I don't remember ever not wanting to fly. I just grew up with it. I mean, I didn't get to do it. That's how I ended up in the military. I got in the Air Force, just wanted to be around airplanes.
Okay.
So I took a freshman year of college and said I just wasn't ready for it. So dropped out, did 5 years in the active duty, came out, and then I did 6 more years in the Ohio Air National Guard because they were paying tuition. So that's how I paid for my degree. That and working. It took me 9 years because I could only ever do part-time.
Okay.
Turned out not to matter. By the time I got my degree, I was already in the career. The only ones that ever cared were Microsoft. They back when I worked at CompuServe, Microsoft called me a couple times to interview me. They were starting their own online information service. And it was like the 3rd time they'd called me before they asked me where I got my degree from. Airplane right there. Didn't show up on the traffic. That's odd. Oh no, there he is. He's right there. He turned. That's the one that was crossing in front of us. He turned.
He's moving it.
Yep. They asked me where I got my degree from. I said I didn't have one, and they hung up. That's the last they ever called me.
Which is funny, considering the founder.
Right, I know. Is this something you've always wanted to do, or is it just...
I've always loved planes, and it actually began with model airplanes.
Yeah, it always does. I had all the RC airplanes. Yep.
Yep.
It always does. Yeah, you can't not do it. I mean, it's all I'd ever wanted to do. And I'm glad I started young because I run into so many guys that are my age now. I wish I'd have done that. I wish I'd have done it. It's too late for me now. And it really isn't. But they just, it'll be a lot harder now.
Yeah.
To the east, Delaware.
Okay, so there's a guy departing out of the, he's coming out of Delaware to the east. We're down southwest, so it shouldn't be a problem. Depending on how he turns out, he may come off of the runway heading to west and come back towards us to the south to head off to the east. We're at 3,500 feet. Shouldn't really be a factor, but it's something to be aware of. That's why you listen.
Yeah.
What brought you to the States?
My family did, actually. My sister married an Ohioan, of all things. And she decided to start popping out babies, and so parents and my other siblings, we all moved over too.
How old were you?
I was only 8 at the time.
Oh, man, so you grew up American.
I grew up American, but I mean, we traveled back all the time, and I also went to university in South Africa, so I moved back after high school.
Now, where in South Africa?
Born and raised in Durban on the East Coast.
Say it again.
Durban.
Durban?
Yeah.
Delta, Uniform, Romeo, Bravo? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. That guy that's departing east is actually departing east, so he's not going to be a factor. He's just going to fly straight out.
Okay.
But here's your Delaware County Airport. It doesn't look a whole lot different than any other airport, but I think it's a pretty well-run place. So this will probably be pretty good for you.
Right.
The drive coming out of downtown, I mean, once you get out of, get out onto 270 or something, it's not that bad.
I mean, it took me 15 minutes to get down to Bolton,
Yeah.
so...
And I mean, for every 3 flights you schedule, you're going to fly one of them, with the weather and everything.
Yeah.
Marine traffic.
Well, I'll have to look up Durban on the map.
Yeah. So yeah, that's on the East Coast, but I went to university at the University of Cape Town on the West Coast. Beautiful, beautiful city. And it's funny because another thing that keeps on inspiring me to want to fly, one of my best friends, his dad was a commercial pilot for a while. Then he was, what was he? He was flying private jets and things like that. And now he's a stunt pilot for Red Bull. And he's in his 60s.
Yeah, oh, you can fly. I mean, with the LSA, you can fly forever. You don't have medicals anymore. All right, let's do something fun with the autopilot. We're going to head back, but we want to be 5,500 over Columbus Class C. It's at 4,800, but we have to be at a VFR altitude.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell the autopilot. If you watch right there, I'm going to tell it I want to go up to 5,500 feet.
Okay.
Now you'll note that the airplane hasn't done that yet. It's waiting for me to say when. So I can plan ahead. I can say, I know I'm going to want to go to 5,500. It's going to wait for me to say, yeah, go ahead and do it. And now it's going to start that climb. Slowly, but it'll do it. What's our vertical speed at? Okay, it's only went to 100. I want that. There we go. It usually defaults to 500. I'll have to check and see why it didn't do that. They didn't punch it hard enough. So there, see it's starting to come up now?
Yeah.
Now you're responsible for the throttle with this. The autopilot knows nothing about the throttle. So as it climbs, the plane is going to slow down. So you have to monitor the throttle. We'll just go ahead and give it a little, we know it's going to want more, so we'll just go ahead and give it to it. Now let's find Columbus. We're going to zoom out. It's going to be down here somewhere. There it is. There's Class C. And we're going to want to fly over campus area right around there. So what we're going to do is take our track, which we're not currently following, so we can do anything we want with it. That's the track knob. I get back on the airplane. Turn our track knob back that way. And we're far enough away that we'll make that altitude before we get there, so I'm going to go ahead and let it do that. So I'm going to tell it, go ahead track mode. And it's going to do the climb and the turn for us. We don't have to do a thing. But this is, again, where you want to watch the airspeed. If it starts doing something that's going to slow us down, we want to either take over by pushing that button right here, or you can overpower it. You can actually just overpower it, whatever you need to do.
Go back to autocorrect.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's doing fine at 92 knots. We can do almost anything and not stall it.
Sounds good up here.
But you do have to monitor it.
Okay.
There was a plane crash going into Buffalo a few years ago where the pilot let the autopilot level off and he didn't give it any more throttle, and he was busy yapping with the female co-pilot, and neither one of them noticed that the plane was slowing down. So it got to where the stick rattler started going, and then it got to the stick pusher. Basically, it's in a stall, and rather than having been taught to put the nose down, airline pilots were not taught that. He yanked back on the yoke, and he just held it back in the stall until it crashed. And you, flying a plane like this, you would know, you learned that in lesson like 3 or 4, right? You
Yeah.
learned that. And I think they actually trained the way they teach it after that. That was considered to be a bad thing. But the point is, the autopilot can be risky if you don't really understand what it's going to do for you. If you'd have been in an Airbus or something like that, where it has auto throttles, probably would have done it for him.
Yeah.
So the autopilot, I think it's easy to become too dependent on it or to trust it a little more than you should.
So it's good at 90 knots?
Oh yeah, we're going to level off here in a bit. Got another 1,000 to go. Yeah, I mean, this stalls at about 48. So now in a turn like that, where we had the nose up and we're in that turn, that stall speed's going to be a lot higher because you've taken some of that lift off of that wing to put it in a turn. So you don't want to bet your life on 48 knots. But like, it'd be really hard to get it stalled at 65 or 70.
Yeah.
And at 92, I'm pretty comfortable. Now it's starting to pick up. See, we're leveled off.
Yeah.
So it's starting to pick up some speed.
Turning south in the pattern for go round number 2.
And we'll go back to listening to Bolt. So now you can see how close campus, there's downtown. It looks very small.
Yeah.
And in campus, we're going to go off to the west a little bit more. Make sure we go over the horseshoe because it's going to be right on your side. But it was going to be almost straight down. So
Yeah,
we're going to bump us off a little bit more to the side here. And we got traffic right there we'll look at. He's 8 miles out and climbing. That's an Embraer. That's a EJ. That's one of those little commuter airlines.
Okay.
What do they call them? Express jets. All right, should be pretty near campus now. I can't see it. Are we too close?
I can see the shoe.
Let me get over a little bit. Where is it? Oh yeah, there it is. This is good right here. Oh, the air is pretty good. If the sun was a little better, you get spectacular pictures. So there's Bolt.
Yeah.
So we're at 5,500 feet, and we're not going to be able to get down because we have to stay above 4,800. So we're going to bump out here to the west to get out of their airspace before we start descending.
Okay.
So I'm going to yank the track over here like this. And then we'll tell the autopilot to take us down to 3,500.
I like how you just have the autopilot do all the work.
I like to keep proficient. This airplane is very easy to fly.
Yeah.
And the autopilot, you got to stay proficient with it because it's somewhat complicated. And when I was first started using it, it did things that absolutely surprised me. And I didn't really want to be surprised by my autopilot.
Yeah.
So I use it every now and then just to stay proficient. So this is 4,800, we're at 5,500, so we can start down.
Okay. Are we pulling up on the throttle?
Yep. We'll pull it back to about 4,000. Or 4,800, I mean. There we go, because you really want to watch, you don't redline it. It'll go redline easily.
Yeah. I'm noticing that it likes to go.
Yep. It's light, and it has a lot of power. So the LSA rules, by law, to be an LSA airplane, it can't have a sustained cruise speed of greater than 120 knots. Well, this airplane is 735 pounds empty. That engine is 100 horsepower. So a 750-pound airplane with a 100 horsepower engine would do way more than 120 knots.
Oh, yeah.
So they had to put that energy someplace. So they put it in the wing. That's why it climbs at 1,000 foot per minute at 70 knots. They built all that lift into the wing. So it's real light. It still responds, and it accelerates and decelerates well, which is what we just did. It'll accelerate very well. But mostly it's about climb. It can carry a lot of weight. It's me, full fuel, and a guy that weighs 265 pounds, if he'll fit in here. It'll carry a tremendous amount of weight.
So what made you choose to build one instead of?
I'd always wanted to build one.
Yeah?
I was waiting for the right kit. So the airplane I had before this was a Vans RV-6. And that was one of the earliest kits when somebody finally started manufacturing a complete kit. You used to just build by plans. And I could never finish one. There's no way in the world I'd be able to finish one. The metal comes shaped but not drilled, so you have to build jigs. You jig it all up, then you have to match drill. You have to lay out the rivet patterns and match drill and hand, solid rivets. There's a guy at Bolt, took him 18 years to build his. The guy that built the one I owned, I took him 5 or 6 years working full-time on it. This, if I worked full-time on it, would have been 6 months.
Okay.
It's all pre-drilled, so the metal's all formed, it's pre-drilled, it just rivets together. You just basically assemble it. So this one was approachable. And I'd always wanted to build one, but I always said at the time, I'd say building an airplane is something you do when you're trying to fill your time, not when you're trying to find time.
Yeah.
This one was a little bit different. This one, it's so step by step. The plans are so complete. It's like putting together a big Lego set. And this is one I figured I could get done. And I like the LSA. I didn't want to get my physicals anymore. I wanted something easy enough for my daughter to learn, and this was a perfect airplane for it. It's very modern,
yeah.
So I got all modern stuff. So it just turned out to be the confluence of kind of an approachable build, and you end up with a quality airplane. And I enjoyed the building. I mean, that was a blast. I love that blog.
Yeah. What's the range on this tank?
It's 20 gallons at worst. I figured there's no way in the world I'm ever going to burn 6 gallons an hour. I may burn up to 5.5. So I plan on 3 hours. That's 18 gallons with a 2-gallon reserve. And at 110 knots, that's 300 nautical miles.
Yeah.
Consider the wind. So you go 400 miles in it.
That's
and then that leaves you with your half-hour reserve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
that's
and at 10 to 15 bucks an hour, I mean, it's crazy.
I mean, that's the distance to Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah, I flew the RV-6 up to Chicago. This one I haven't taken up that far. Now that's Darby Dan, and that Darby Dan Airport, the tower knows where that is, so that'll be a good place to report for them.
Okay.
So basically what we'll do is we'll head south. He's going to clear us probably into what he'll ask for is report 2-mile right base for runway 22. And from Darby Dan, that's a 90-degree turn from here, so that'll be real easy. We'll just come up here a little bit, we'll turn 90 degrees, get in the vicinity of Darby Dan. We don't have to be exactly over it. We'll call the tower, and he'll tell us report a 2-mile right base for runway 22. We'll head straight on in.
Okay.
And I'll hand fly it. I haven't flown for a while, so we'll just hand fly it. I didn't fly it all this morning. I let Austin do all of it. And we're on tower, so that's nice confirmation. Already have ground dialed in.
7 Charlie Papa, midfield, runway 22.
That's Columbus Police. They do some practice auto rotations here.
Runway 22.
So we'll have to work around him.
Runway 22, 7 Charlie Papa.
So I already have the ground frequency dialed in, so I don't have to do that when we're rolling out on the runway. I always try to stay one frequency ahead if I can. You learn that when you do your instrument rating. You always want to have as much done as you can get reasonably done, because you can get really, really busy. The helicopters, Columbus Police come and practice our auto rotations.
Here at Bolton?
Yeah, and it's fun to watch. I can sit on my front porch and watch it. They're flying along, and then they just plummet like a rock.
Really?
The auto rotation, it's like the engine is out, right? They're just using residual inertia in the rotors, so they want to get it all the way down. They don't want to use any of that lift until they get down to where they pull that back in, and they have just enough to soften their landing.
Wow.
And it sounds like something you have to practice a lot, because it is. And they come out here and practice that.
Wow.
I'd love to fly a helicopter. I just wouldn't spend the money on it. Even with a private pilot rating and instrument rating, it would cost me another $7,000 to get a helicopter add-on. And then what do I do with it? Nobody's going to rent you a helicopter.
What about a gyrocopter?
You don't need a license for those. Just do that anytime you want. You can get experimental gyrocopters pretty easy. I like them. I like the idea of them. I'm getting kind of scared in my old age, though. I'm a little more risk averse than I used to be.
I have a friend that has a two-seater gyro.
Yeah, I'm tempted. Never like to give these guys a holler.
Hold tower, experimental 284 Delta Golf over Darby Dan, inbound landing.
Experimental 4 Delta Golf, Bolton Tower, report midfield, right downwind, runway 22. Wind is 160 at 10, altimeter 3037.
Report right downwind 22, 4 Delta Golf.
I was hoping I guess because the helicopter's there, we're going to be a little more structured about this. Normally he would have cleared me right into a right base.
Okay.
Now he wants me to report midfield downwind, means I probably have to do a midfield downwind. So we're going to head a little further south than we were. I was already aiming for that base. This is why we don't assume. Look how cold that engine got.
It's dropping.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to put what I end up doing in the winter is putting a little like I have that aluminum tape over the oil cooler. I'll put that over the radiator too. Unlike most aircraft engines, which are air cooled, this one is a hybrid. The cylinder sides are air cooled. The cylinder heads are water cooled. And see that when I pull that power off, those cylinder heads get really cold.
Yeah.
And that's why we're not getting any heat, because so did the radiator fluid. So I block off a little bit of that radiator just to keep it warmer in the winter. I've already done it with the oil. Otherwise, the oil will just never get warm. You want the oil to get hot, especially in the winter when you're not flying as much, because it gets some moisture in it.
Yeah.
And if you can get it really, really hot for about a half hour, it gets all that moisture out of it, so your engine's not just corroding from the inside out. Now some people, it's an experimental, so I can do anything I want. Some people have put these little shutters across their radiator and they have a control in here to open and close it. But to me, that seems like that's taking some of the cooling off in the summer, and it gets really hot here in the summer, so I don't really want to do that.
Have you done any gliding?
Yeah, once or twice.
What do you think of that then?
I could see having one. I mean, they're not that expensive. That's the kind of thing. I can't own 2 airplanes because the wife loves to remind me I'm not Harrison Ford, by which I thought she meant I lacked the craggy good looks. What she really meant is we can't afford to have 2 to 5 airplanes. Now, when it comes to airplanes, you need at least 2, but no more than 5 to address every need, right? You need your corporate, your travel plane, your aerobatic plane, you need your glider. So when I finally get myself relocated and retired, I'll keep this one, and then I'll start looking for partnerships for things like in a glider or a seaplane or something like that. I've got my float plane ready. I got that in July of this year. That's the kind of plane you could share without running into all kinds of squabbles about scheduling and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's recreational flying at its finest. I'd like to have something like a Piper Cub. You just
Tower, helicopter 7, Charlie Papa, midfield, runway 22.
All right, I'll watch for him. So you just pop that door down and fly around down low on a summer day, or an open cockpit biplane.
That would be a lot of fun.
I don't want to own one, but I want to share one.
Be able to fly it at will.
Yep. All right, gonna have to start paying attention to what's going on now. Or where the helicopter is, I don't see him. Oh, he's off right there. There he is. He's off the end of the runway somewhere. 100 feet below us. There he is, I got him.
Yeah.
I thought he was off at 2-2. That looks more like he's just flying a real tight pattern.
Bolt Tower 4 Delta Golf is midfield right downwind 22.
So 4 Delta Golf, you're number 2 behind helo traffic on the left base. Report traffic in sight to follow.
4 Delta Golf, traffic in sight, we'll follow.
Experimental 4 Delta Golf, number 2, runway 22, clear to land.
Number 2 to land on runway 22, 4 Delta Golf.
All right. Now watch that helicopter because he's going to do weird stuff.
I have experimental traffic on the right now one behind you. Make this one in just a quick touch and go.
That's what I was going to say.
Wilco in negative contact.
He's going to basically stop on the runway, and I need to know that. Generally, I land long, so we don't have a long taxi back. But with this guy, he's going to kind of park there and then go. So we're going to give him kind of an extended downwind. No real hurry to get. No real hurry to get behind him, since he's going to be a bit of an obstruction. There he goes. So now he's in his auto rotation, dropping like a brick. And you'll see him, he's going to come right over the end of the runway. That's when you'll be able to see him because he'll stand out against the white of it.
There he goes.
Yep. So he's just going to make that quick. He's just going to pop down and go. So we'll go ahead and turn in. And we just want to watch and make sure he goes. It's up to me. I'm number 2, cleared to land, but it's on me to make sure I don't run into him.
Yeah.
And there he goes. So we're good.
How often are they doing these rotations?
They do this a lot, and you can imagine why. It's something you hardly ever do. I mean, you may go your entire flying career without doing one for real. But if you think about the timing required, to make sure you maintain that energy until you need it, I'd see where you'd want to practice that an awful lot. Plus, they're flying a helicopter on the taxpayer dime. Who wouldn't do that? I mean, I'd be all over that.
I'd be loving it then.
Yeah, try to keep me from going out and practicing. Not me, man. I'm out there every day. I think that would be a pretty neat job. I wouldn't want to be a normal cop. I think, some of the stuff they have to deal with the domestic squabbles and all that, I don't think I'd be good at that. But I wouldn't mind doing the helicopter part of it. But I mean, at the end of the day, that's still a cop. If he has to land and get out and run and chase somebody, he'll do it. Just like when you're in the Marines, everybody in the Marines is a Marine. You learn how to shoot, you learn how to fight, no matter if you're a supply clerk or whatever. So we got a little bit of wind from the left. See, I'm kind of crabbing into that.
Yeah.
Hold it straight down the runway. I'm looking at about 70 knots right now. 65 would be okay, but it's a little bumpy.
You using rudder or
I'm using a lot of rudder.
Okay.
And Fulton Tower, helicopter 7 Charlie Papa,
Bit choppy.
runway 22.
7 Charlie Papa, runway 22 cleared for the option. Traffic just touching down on the numbers.
There we go. Boy, that was
Runway 22 clear for the option.
dusty and choppy.
Charlie Papa has traffic inside.
So we made it.
He's going to want me right on Alpha 3, straight ahead to Park Minor Ground Point 8. Feel like gusting?
Yeah.
I would have expected him to tell me by now. Not going to do it. I'll have to call him. So you just do this proactively.
Fulton ground 284, Delta Golf clear runway Alpha 3, taxi to Park.
Delta Golf, taxi straight to the park.
Straight to Park, taxi. 4 Delta Golf.
This guy, I know a lot of people that fly in and out of here that when he doesn't clear them like that, they just keep going.
Yeah.
I just can't stand the idea of that. Well, there's a guy with engine trouble.
Hopefully nothing too...
Yep. Checking the oil. Light. Okay, now watch him drop when he gets up here. There he goes.
Wow, he's dropped.
Now he's got to hold that energy and hold that energy and hold that until just the last minute, because he only got so much, only so much inertia in there. But he's already lifted a little bit. He pulled the nose back a little bit.
Yep.
So he's starting to slow it down. There it is.
And away.
Yep. That looked like fun.
That looks like a lot of fun. Not even just to do, but just to be in the chopper to do it.
I've got a good helicopter simulator on my computer. And the one thing I'll tell you is how damn hard it is to fly a helicopter. They don't have any kind of stability at all. You're managing every single aspect of that every second. That feels so weird over here. How does somebody in South Africa even meet an Ohioan? Just struck me.
Yeah, no. Believe me, a lot of people question that same thing. Long story short, though, he came to South Africa, and his grandparents knew my parents. So it just kind of worked out that way.
Okay. So we want to make note of the Hobbs, because I'm going to write that down, 172.6.
Okay.
And now this thing, that gearbox has a clutch in it. So if you just shut it off like it's spinning this fast, it'll do this kind of sound. It makes a just terrible sound like a two-cycle engine seizing up. So what we do instead,
take it down.
Well, I'm going to pull it back, and at the same time as it's kind of winding down just on its own, I'm going to turn off the ignition switches one at a time.
Okay.
And in theory, it'll just kind of drift to a stop.
Engine speed.
And you don't get the thing.
Yeah.
So that's it. So 172.7, I want to write that down. And this turns off the audio. So bye, everybody.